Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to this DigiPrint Supplies webinar, The Hidden Face of Third-Party Ink Swaps. As always during our webinars, chat will be opened at the end of the session for your questions, and also if you want to view the webinar again, it will be available on our support website as well as on our YouTube channel. I'll put the YouTube channel in the chat window. Previous webinars and installation videos, head replacement videos, all that stuff can be found on our YouTube channel as well. There's a little poll up there asking you if you already use third-party inks or if you're considering to use third-party inks. Okay, so I'll end that so that we can start our webinar of today. Okay, and I'll share my screen, my monitor with you. Just a second. Let's go full screen there. Here we go. Right. So basically what we're going to look at today is when you switch from original inks to third-party inks, what is actually involved? What are the culprits? What are the considerations that you have to make? Okay. Now, let's start about looking a bit at ink of today. That's nice. Back here. So let's take a look at ink, and let's start with looking at the reasons why you would switch from original to third-party inks. Okay, and despite the third-party inks manufacturers advertising, telling you that you might have a bigger color gamut, or you have more flexible ink, which is important in UV printing, or you might have a better adhesion of their ink to a certain media, the main reason is and still is money. Ink is expensive, and the main reason why people switch to third-party inks is just it's cheaper. The rest of the claims made by third-party ink manufacturers, they're doubtful at least. But yes, it will be cheaper. And you can see that ink, this is roughly the price of solvent ink today, not of all solvent ink, of course. Original solvent ink, UV ink, is cheaper because it's sold in much bigger quantities, and water-based ink for your desktop inkjet printer at home is much more expensive than 200 euro per liter. If you compare that to other liquids that you might or might not consume every day, then yes, ink is very expensive. Okay, so that's the main reason. Now, the two types of inks we're going to look at and discuss is, on one hand, UV ink, and on the other hand, solvent ink. And we'll have a lot of concentration on solvent ink, to be honest. And you can see the composition of both ink types in the diagram, where you can see that for solvent ink, you have about 17% that is pigments, that is actually color. And if you look at UV ink, it's about 5%. And the less of your ink is actually pigments, the more difficult it is to reach the same colorimetry with a different ink. So that's why in solvent inks nowadays, we have third-party ink manufacturers that have these so-called plug and print solutions. So you take out an original cartridge, you put in a third-party cartridge, and you continue printing. We will see that this is not always the case, that it is completely chemical and colorimetric compatible with the original inks. And their claim of plug and print is, of course, only viable if you're using cartridges. If you have a bulk ink system, then forget about plug and print. All right. Now, solvents, nobody uses hard solvent anymore. You either have mild solvent or eco solvent. And the big difference between the two is that eco solvent still requires a better coated media while mild solvent gets away with media that is less coated. So sometimes you would like to switch from an original eco-solvent ink to a mild solvent third-party ink. And then again, of course, it's not a plug and print solution. And the reason for switching them to mild solvent would be that you want to use media which is less expensive. So not only will the ink be less expensive, but also your media would be less expensive because it's less coated, and there's a step in manufacturing of the media that is skipped for that type of media. All right. So which are the parts involved in doing an ink swap? Well, of course, your print head is, or your print heads if you have multiple. When going from one solvent ink to another type of solvent, the risks of having contamination in your print head are limited. Of course, if you would go from a water-based printer, let's say a Muto draft station, you want to make that a solvent printer, this is completely possible. But the question is your print head in your draft station, your Muto draft station, or your water-based printer, is it compatible with solvent, yes or no? And to determine that, you really need to know the specifications of that print head. Actually, to be sure that you will not have any issues after the ink swap, I would actually advise to replace the print head. We'll get back later to this tool. You know it if you looked at previous webinars done by Digit Print Supplies, then you know this is our print head cleaning tool that can be used to prime a new print head as well. And it's a tool that is important when you want to do an ink swap. Dampers. This is the first part in your printer that might be questionable when you do a plug and print or when you use a plug and print solution. Yes, even if you flush the entire system and all ink goes out of your system, you will notice that there is a small filter in that damper near the bottom of the damper itself. And the reason that that filter is there is to prevent any contamination inside the ink entering the print head. So any particles that are not a particular size get stuck in that filter. This is the reason why you have to replace your dampers every 3 or 6 months. So if you do an ink swap, then there's always ink left in that filter. It can't get through. It can't get through to your heads, but it will come in contact with the new ink. And if they are not 100% chemical compatible, then the results of this mixture is very unpredictable. Okay, so good advice: when you do an ink swap, replace the dampers. They're not very expensive and they're very easy to replace. You need to replace them every 3 or 6 months anyhow. Wipers, which clean your print head when you do a normal or a heavy-duty cycle cleaning. These should be replaced when you do an ink swap as well. They are full of ink, which is logical. Tubing. We'll get back to tubing in a few slides. Do you need to replace the tubing when you swap inks? In general, no. Okay. When you do an actual swap, and we'll see that in detail as well, one of the first things you do is flush the entire ink system. We'll look at the ink system of our Muto printer here to see every part that is involved in it. So when you do the flushing in a correct way, there will be no more ink left in the tubing. So replacing the tubing, no. Tubing is replaced in a printer when the printer has not printed for several months, and it was not put in a state that could be acceptable for not printing several months. In other words, it was not flushed. Then yes, the ink will start to cure inside or hard inside the tubing, and there's no solution left other than to replace that tubing. But for an ink swap, going from original to third party, no. Often forgotten when we talk about tubing is all the connectors involved. We'll see a couple of connectors in this one as well. Same story, if the flushing was done correctly, no replacement necessary. That doesn't say anything about the compatibility yet. And of course, if we talk UV printers, then you need to replace your filters. Whether the third-party ink is chemical compatible or not, you need to replace your filters. They, just like your dampers in a wide format printer, in a super wide format printer, your filters need to be replaced on regular intervals. So when doing an ink swap or changing to third-party ink, it might be a good idea or the best time to replace your ink filters as well. So going from original to third-party ink, how does it work when the ink, the third-party ink, is not 100% chemically or colorimetrically compatible with the original ink? So for solvents, these are the steps involved. And you should start by doing a nozzle test and then print a test image. Of course, doing a nozzle test, and if there are nozzles missing, then you have to address that problem before you actually do the ink swap or before you actually print the test image. And the test image is important because that's the first way, or the much, how should I say this? The easiest way to actually see visually if the new ink gives you the same quality, if the new ink gives you the same colorimetric values on site. So once that's done, you remove the OEM cartridges, the original cartridges, and you flush the entire ink pad. And you need to do that until your ink tubes are clear, all right? Now, clear is not the same as completely transparent again, all right? You have to be able to look through your ink tubes, but they will still have a hint of magenta, cyan, yellow, if that was the color that they were transporting in your printer. You replace the dampers, and then you install the third-party cartridges. Now, before you replace the dampers, and after you completely flushed the ink out of your printer, it is still a good idea to use this little tool here to manually flush your print head. Okay. You install the third-party cartridges and you prime the ink pad. So you load the complete ink pad from the cartridges all through the tubes into the dampers up to your head. All right. And then you do that nozzle test again. And if the nozzle test is okay, all your nozzles will be back. This will take a while, usually. Then you do the test image again. You can compare the nozzle tests. You should have a perfect nozzle test for the ink swap and a perfect one after the ink swap. But you can also compare whether the nozzle test lines itself with the new one are still straight, are still free of satellites and mist and stuff like that. And the images, like I explained, you compare the images to see if the new ink gives you the same result. If it is indeed an ink that is 100% colorimetrically compatible, then you should not see any difference whatsoever. Okay. Now for UV printers, it's roughly the same. You just discharge the original ink. You first use original flush to flush the entire ink pad. Then you use a third-party flush, and in UV ink, the compatibility between the cleaning liquid and the ink that you use is much more critical than in solvent printers. That's why after you flushed it with the original, you flush it with third-party to get the original flush out. You replace all your ink filters, and then you load the third-party ink. Okay, and then you enjoy your new ink, but steps missing here, to be honest, is nozzle test, test image, and in the end again, nozzle test, test image, and then compare. So, tubing chemical resistance. You have some, well, there's different kinds of materials that is used for tubing. The most known ones are Titanium, Teflon, and nylon. They're on the top of the chart. And this is a comparison between original Mimaki solvent ink and a third-party solvent ink. And where you can see that some of the tubing materials like nylon are compatible or are chemical resistant to the ink made by Mimaki. It is not to the ink made by, in this case, Bordeaux. All right. You can see the three main components of every solvent ink. So Mimaki uses diethylene glycol, vinyl chloride, and vinyl acetate, while in the third-party ink we have ethyl ether, dicholine glycol, and gamma. And then something I have very much trouble to announce. It's actually a butyl. So sometimes the original ink is compatible with the certain type of tubing material, and that material might be in your printer, but your third-party ink is actually not. Which is something that you will, if it is extreme, if the value assigned to it in this chemical compatibility is a D, is something that you will see very, very quickly. If you would use polyurethane tubing in any solvent printer, then it will not take you months before you see that it is not chemical compatible. It will start to swell, or deform, or even dissolve in weeks. Okay. At the bottom, I also added nitrile and latex, where you can see that nitrile, which is the blue gloves, which are compatible, or which are advised to be used with UV ink, they're actually not very compatible with solvents, while latex has a better resistance, but still it has some values, especially for the vinyl chloride and vinyl acetate in the Mimaki ink. It has a C value there for latex. That means that you can safely use them, but if you would drop a latex glove in a bottle of solvent ink, then after a couple of weeks it would look totally different, and after a couple of months it would probably be gone. All right, so very important is the chemical compatibility of the tubing used in your printer. Right, last thing that you need to consider is your colors, or your color management. What does swapping from an original ink to third-party ink do for your colors? Now, first of all, the claim usually is you swap to our third-party ink and you don't need to make any ICC profiles. And if you look at this specific graph, which is original ink, I mistyped, put in generic profile, but it's the original profile, so after that, which is the white line, and then you have the third-party ink, which is the black line. Then you will see, yes, it's actually compatible. All right, but using the third-party ink, my color gamut increased. The black line has a bigger area than the white line, which means that now with your new ink, there are colors that can be printed which you could not print with the original ink. So if you don't make new color profiles, then you're actually missing something. All right. Sometimes it's the opposite, that the gamut is smaller than the original gamut. The claim should never be that the third-party ink is colorimetrically compatible with the original in that case, but usually it's bigger. Okay. So if we look on a picture of this, where you can see the original Roland ink in that case, and third-party plug and print third-party ink from NASDAQ, then you will see that it actually, without even profiling, and it's 100% colorimetrically compatible, it actually has a stronger red. So in order to have exactly the same picture like you had before, if you would want that, but that depends, of course, on your type of work that you're doing and your workflow, then you need to reprofile. And if you look at it in detail on the profiles and compare them, what you see in color in the three images is the Roland profile, and what you see grayed is the NASDAQ profile. It's a Roland SP540 in this case, and media used is a vinyl from Rit Brahma. Okay, and you can see that the gamut of colors, the range of colors that we can print with the NASDAQ ink is slightly bigger than what we could print with the Roland ink, and that's why the reds all of a sudden are more present in the picture, because even if you did use the correct color management workflow, you start from the original image, which has its embedded profile, which is usually an RGB profile nowadays. So there were colors possible already in that picture, but you couldn't see them after you printed. Now you can see them. That's why the red got stronger. So the claim that you do not have to do your color management, okay, yes and no. It also depends on what you expect, what quality you expect. If you already have a color management workflow and you want this to stay predictable, if after you swap to third-party inks, then yes, you really should do a color management and reprofile your printer. All right. And the last thing is head calibration, especially important with UV printers. You have a voltage on your print head, and that actually determines how the droplets will be formed when the print head is printing. But since you are now loading a different ink, it might be that the voltages need to be adjusted, and you're actually on your own when you do that. In this particular case, for this Psycho GS508 print head, you can see two voltages there, and probably it's a head used in a Vutec printer. Probably if you enter those voltages and you use original inks, then everything is fine. Maybe a little bit of tweaking. You switch to third-party inks, then it might be that the voltages necessary to reach the same results in alignment tests are considerably different than what is printed on the head. Okay, so I'll switch back to here, stop the sharing, and switch to my second camera. Go. Okay. Let's see if that works okay. All right, there it is. So this is actually one of our printers. Let's see if I can switch to the Logitech mic, because that will be a lot better to still hear me. So looking at the printer, this is the cartridge. Okay, that's where your ink starts, and every cartridge has a needle connected to a tube, and this is where the ink pad inside your printer actually starts. You can see in this case that you have 4 cartridges, so there's actually 4 tubes here, 1, 2, 3, 4, going into the track. All right, see if we can see them better. 4 tubes. There they are. And they end up here, right, where we have some connectors. Actually, it splits every ink channel in 2 channels because it only has 4 colors, but it does have a DX5 head, which has 8 channels. So it actually ends up with 2 times magenta, 2 times cyan, 2 times yellow, and 2 times black at the print head. And from here, it goes inside your dampers. Where are my dampers? Here they are. They're still labeled. And then from your dampers into your printer. So that's actually your ink pad. Cartridges, needle, tube, sometimes connectors to split. Sometimes there can be connectors in between the tubes going into your dampers to your print head. But that's not your entire ink pad, because you also have this here left, which is your capping. And then underneath the capping, we will have the pump. And that's where your ink pad, as far as switching from original to third-party ink, this is where your ink pad ends at the pump. Okay, the waste, I don't really care that in the waste original and third-party ink is mixed. Okay, so that's how it looks. Let's switch back. Put it here. And we're back. Okay. The microphone so you can hear me better. I'll open the chat now for any questions that you have. It's open. Right. So, waiting for your questions. By the way, I do not answer any questions today about my changed haircut. I have far too many questions about that. Okay, thank you. See some people typing. I'll put the poll up again. See. No, I just thought he would continue, but he doesn't. I see 37% already uses third-party ink, 25 doesn't, and 12% is considering. Can certain third-party inks damage my printer? Well, I'm not going to endorse any third-party ink. I mentioned a couple during the presentation, but that was for reference only. But endorsing third-party ink, I will not do that. But a golden rule or a thumb rule is actually that you should stick to the known manufacturers. If you start using third-party inks from unknown brands or unknown sources, then who knows what might happen. And to be honest, when we're talking about third-party ink manufacturers, then the people actually manufacturing, you can easily count them on the fingers of one hand. So you stick with the known brands, then normally not. If you use unknown brands, besides the ones that advertise with their plug and print solutions, for instance, they do have a warranty with some exclusions, but they actually claim that if you use our ink and you have broken parts in your printer, of which you can prove that they are broken due to our third-party ink, then we will reimburse you whatever is broken and needs to be replaced. No, we don't. Sorry, yes, we supply original inks for Roland. Yeah. I thought you said third party. Not always, Manu. Not always. But what they did, they actually did do a good job in is, or do a good job is that they made sure that it's chemically nearly 100% compatible. So the claim is that if you have your printer, and let's say they have 6 cartridges in there, original ones, and one of the cartridges is out, needs to be replaced, then you can take it out and put a third-party one in there and just continue printing. So doing the switch from original to third-party as your cartridges run out of ink. On the other hand, if you look at colorimetrically 100% compatible, then as you saw in the example, they just make sure that their color gamut is wider, is bigger than the original one, but still that can lead to unpredictable results because as I explained, a lot of people actually put RGB images into their RIBs today, which RGB by default has a bigger color gamut than any CMYK capable device. And you go from RGB to CMYK to your printer with original ink. So you go from something like this to something like this, all right? And all of a sudden, you can go from something like this to something like this, okay? With your third-party ink. So that means that those colors that were always there in your RGB image, that could not be printed with your original inks now can with your third-party inks, and that leads to the unpredictable results. So if you want this to happen uh, without unpredictable results, then chemically it's okay, it's fine. I shouldn't do this. It's fine actually, but colorimetrically you should reprofile. Yes, yes, you should. You should use the cleaning liquid that is compatible with your printer. You're actually going to push cleaning liquid through your print head. There's ink in your print head. There's going to be ink on your capping. There's going to be some ink in your pump, and you do not want to make a mixture with a cleaning liquid of which you do not know if it is compatible with your ink and will not start gelling, for instance. So that's why if you use cleaning solution with the cleaning tool, then make sure that you know that it is compatible with your ink. The damper actually feeds your print head. It makes sure that your print head gets its ink in a consistent way. That's what your damper does. It's like a little secondary ink tank with a filter, and the filter's job in the damper, so not actually the damper itself, but the filter in the damper will make sure that any contamination in the ink does not go through and does not reach your print head. So in that way, yes, it protects your print head. You're welcome, Menno. You're welcome. So So as I said in when we started this webinar, you can watch it again on our support website, on our YouTube channel. Actually, just go to youtube.com, type in digital supplies, and you'll end up on our channel. You can watch this webinar. You can watch all the webinars we did in the last 2 years. You can watch videos on printhead replacement, on scan motor replacement, on all sorts of technical replacements and modifications and whatever we do with printers. Okay, so thank you for watching. Hope to see you again next month and have a nice day. Cheers.